Welcome to Farm to Stable, a science-based equine nutrition podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nettie Liebert. I'm a lifelong horse person and professional equine nutritionist with the goal of helping horses and their humans create balanced diets to set them up for success, no matter what age, discipline, or circumstance. Disclaimer, the information discussed here is based on current scientific research and is for educational purposes only. Every horse's individual needs vary. This is not a substitute for veterinary medicine or nutrition consultation. Hello and welcome to another episode of Farm to Stable, an equine nutrition podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nettie Liebert, back with a little bit of spring fever. Here in the Northeast United States, we've had a little taste of warm weather before it gets cold again. So make sure your horses are drinking water. But I digress. The topic for this episode has to do with helping your horse to regain any weight loss that may have occurred over the winter, and inspired by a friend of mine who reached out to me that said, now that my horse is shedding, I'm really noticing some ribs. And this is in a horse that is traditionally a very easy keeper. Very easy keeper. Like he has Morgan in his genes. Morgan horses are known to be very easy keepers. But that said, he's also a little bit older, in his late teens. And this is a common occurrence, not only for older horses, but for a lot of horses. So given the time of year that I'm recording this, I thought it would be timely because she's certainly not the only one experiencing this with her horse. And this is a well-managed horse. So it's not a matter of, set it and forget it. This is someone who sees her horse on a regular basis and grooms him, but he's, a heavier set, bigger boned horse. So when all of a sudden, as he sheds, now she's seeing ribs, it's not something that she's used to seeing. There are many reasons that a horse may have lost weight over winter, from very cold temperatures, which we have had here in North America this winter, changes in health conditions, dental, age, etc. We'll dive into these a little bit, but I do want to start with weather. Everybody talks about the weather. We're all ready for some warm weather here in North America, at least those of us in the Northeast. And cold has the effect of increasing the amount of energy that a horse needs to burn off in order to stay warm. Now, the horse's internal furnace is the cecum, right? As the small intestine empties into the cecum, it's a fermentation vat. And one of the byproducts of fermentation is heat. So it is estimated that a horse has what's called the lower critical temperature between 30 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on how long their hair coat is, their general body condition, their age. So what that means is that below the lower critical temperature, that's when a horse needs to start to burn more energy to keep warm, to maintain their body temperature. And for every 10 degrees Fahrenheit that the temperature drops below that critical temperature, a horse needs approximately an extra 2,000 kilocalories to maintain their body temperature. So usually this can be achieved with an extra 3 pounds of hay on the average, give or take. But now when you factor in rain and wind, that increase in energy quickly grows to more than what can be supplied by hay alone. And again, in North America, or at least in the Northeast, we had it seemed like relentless wind and very cold temperatures all winter. So if you're in that area of the world, you may be going, it was definitely a little colder than normal. But no matter where you are in the world, if you live in a climate that does get cold seasonally, it's something to think about. Now, why am I talking about all of this? It's just to give you a little bit of background. Now, remember that hay is the best option for warmth. And I've said before in this space, if a cold snap is coming, give your horse a little extra forage to help that fermentation vat get going so they have some extra heat. But as I mentioned, sometimes hay alone is not enough for the horse to maintain all the energy they need to keep warm, especially if they are older, if they are unblanketed, if they are living outside. For example, fat, as I've mentioned, is a really great option to supply a lot of calories without a lot of bulk to the ration. And for example, a half a cup of vegetable oil provides roughly about 1,000 kilocalories. A full cup may be closer to about 2,000. That's a lot. Now, for an average 1,100-pound horse at maintenance, typically that horse is consuming 20 to 22,000 kilocalories per day, just to give you some context and, trivia for your next time you're watching Jeopardy. So vegetable oil packs a lot of punch, and fat in general packs a lot of punch. And of course, combined with hay and a balanced diet, then you can get what you need, adding in calories without adding a lot of bulk to the ration. So I do want to talk about age. Of course, senior horses hold a special place in my heart. And as horses age, it becomes harder for them to regulate their body temperature. This actually has to do with natural changes in cardiovascular output. So I won't get into the nitty-gritty of that, but cardiovascular output in general is helping to circulate fluids in the body, helping to cool, warm, all of those things. So some of that change can be attenuated with regular exercise, but it may take overall more energy to remain warm in cold conditions. And again, especially if you have an older horse who is either off for the winter or not being ridden anymore, you may not be able to attenuate those changes as well. So the first thing we're going to do is get an estimate of body weight. Come on, I had to say it, right? You can use a weight tape or the Healthy Horse app if you don't have a scale. Become familiar with body condition scoring. Now, I'm going to put some links in the show notes for a really great video from Dr. Bob Coleman at the University of Kentucky, a colleague of mine and a well-respected equine expert. I'm going to put a link to that video in the show notes along with some links on where you can get a weight tape. You can also check your local feed store or tack shop. They may have them available as well. So we're getting an estimate of body weight first. Next, make an appointment with your veterinarian. So you'll need to schedule your spring health check and vaccinations anyway. So have your vet do an overall general exam. Be sure to ask your vet to check your horse's teeth and address any potential dental problems. Remember that if a horse cannot properly chew, then proper diet cannot be consumed. And this is very common. I can't tell you how many times I've had clients say to me, "Oh, I feed my horse all the hay he wants. And yes, he eats 40 pounds of hay per day." Well, no, he doesn't, unless he's maybe a draft horse. But no, a lot of times horses with dental problems may quid their hay. They may roll it around in their mouth. But it does happen that horses are not necessarily consuming as much as you think they are if they have dental issues. If you find, balls of wadded up hay on the ground, that is hay they are not consuming. Also remember that poor dentition, poorly chewed feed increases the risk of colic and choke. So we want to minimize those risks as much as possible. So anytime we have some weight loss, especially in an older horse, but in any horse really, one of the things that I'm going to advise you to do is to have your vet or a qualified equine dentist check your horse's teeth. Now, I bet you know what I'm going to say next. Enlist a nutritionist, right? Of course, to help your horse's diet. So it's not always a matter of just adding vegetable oil or just adding some other kind of fat supplement, because there are some consequences that come with that too. The diet needs to be balanced. And when you add fat to a diet, yes, it is an excellent energy source. It is not going to cause a glycemic response and all of those things. But by natural biochemistry, the metabolism of fat does increase the production of free radicals. So one thing we do to counteract that is to make sure the horse also gets enough vitamin E, because vitamin E is a very powerful antioxidant and it can help balance out some of the increases in free radical production that occur with an increase in fat diet. So it's not just a matter of throwing something in front of your horse in many cases. Now, one other note that I want to make, especially when it comes to older horses, is that changes in body weight, particularly if they lose weight, are likely not due to a decline in digestibility. This is an old myth. And there's been some great research from Dr. Brian Nielsen's lab at Michigan State University that showed no difference in the amount of energy and nutrient digestibility in old horses versus mature, younger, healthy horses. Now, again, this was a healthy cohort. So more work needs to be done in horses that may have endocrine disease, such as PPID. But in general, Healthy horses do not differ in their digestive ability as they age. So it's really great to have that research. Just some general solution options for helping that horse regain some of the weight that may have been lost over the winter. We talked about adding a fat supplement. It could be vegetable oil. It could be a commercial fat supplement. It could be a higher fat concentrate feed. It could be increasing the amount of concentrate that your horse is already consuming if they're on one in particular. But that said, it really depends on what your horse is currently eating, how much they're eating, and if an increase is appropriate. Because sometimes your horse could be on a grain and maybe you're feeding several pounds of it and the horse just can't maintain their weight. That often means that that particular concentrate is not necessarily the right one for your horse. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to change brands or any of that, but you might need to tweak the type of concentrate your horse is getting. And again, all changes need to be done slowly. Of course, I have to say that. Now, if your horse is about to get back into training or training is about to ramp up, that is okay. You don't have to not ride or not train when your horse is trying to gain weight, especially if you're planning a busy competition season or even if you're just planning a few competitions or lessons here and there. So you're going to ease into it anyway, right, to allow your horse time to get back into shape. But you want to account for that in the diet. You want to account for some of those extra calorie needs as well. Another option, is it possible to get a higher quality hay? If you're feeding hay that is maybe a little stemmy or a little yellow, is it possible to start mixing in some higher quality hay that's softer, maybe cut before maturity, that would have more nutrient value? You would be amazed sometimes at what just switching to a better forage source can do for a horse. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of my favorite tricks is to add some soaked beet pulp. 1 to 2 quarts of beet pulp shreds, you measure them dry, and then you soak them. For an 11 to 1,200 pound horse, or about 500 kilograms, adds digestible energy. And there's so many benefits to that. So not only does that beet pulp as a fiber source support the healthy microbiome, it doesn't make your horse excitable. It also tends to be palatable. There's a sprinkling of horses that don't like it, but in my experience, the majority of them do. Another disclaimer here, these are very general solutions, some tricks of the trade that we as nutritionists often use to help a horse regain weight as necessary. But it is not necessarily a recommendation for your specific horse. These are just some things that we use in these cases of a horse needing weight gain. So how much weight your horse needs to gain also figures into this. It could be 40 or 50 pounds. It could be 200 pounds if the weight loss is more severe. And in a pony, very rarely do they become too thin over the winter, but it does happen. So make sure you know what's normal. And again, become familiar with what your horse's condition looks like. It's okay to take pictures. It's okay to touch their ribs and see if you can feel them, with pressure similar to what you would use if you were using a curry comb. If you're feeling them, but you're not seeing them, that's an indication that you might be in the ballpark of good condition. If you see them from when looking at your horse from a profile view, maybe they need a little more weight. It really just depends. And again, metabolic status plays a role of this, age, fitness, breed, all of these things. So a lot to keep in mind. So in summary, make sure you get your horse a spring wellness check from your veterinarian, checking out teeth, checking out overall health, maybe some blood work if necessary. You can talk to your vet about what your horse might need. Get a weight estimate for your horse. And again, I'll put some links in the show notes. I always recommend the Healthy Horse app as well. Ease back into work if training has been lightened or stop over winter. Again, it's something you were probably going to do anyway. And slowly add in some additional calories, whether it be from fat or beet pulp or concentrate. A lot of that will depend on how much weight your horse actually needs to gain. And one more note, keep in mind that weight gain, if your horse needs to gain, say, 45 to 50 pounds, that's about one body condition score on the scale of 1 to 9, and it can take 30 to 60 days or more. So be patient with the weight gain for sure. And last, get a diet evaluation from a qualified nutritionist. If someone is presenting themselves to you as a nutritionist, it is okay to ask for credentials. See the very first episode we ever recorded of Farm to Stable, and you can hear my soapbox about finding qualified equine nutritionist. But it really does matter. There have been many cases with myself and my colleagues who have had to fix a lot of issues from people who were not qualified to give nutritional advice and who did. And then the owner and the horse were left to pick up the pieces. So it's okay to ask for credentials. And if I can't help you, I know a lot of people in this business, I can refer you to someone else who probably can. It's okay to ask questions there. So again, I'll have some links in the show notes for you. I hope you have a wonderful spring. If you are in the Northern Hemisphere, getting back into riding in some much more pleasant weather, we hope, with your horse, or just in general, spending more time at the barn, because really, what could be better than that? So have a great time with your horse, and thank you so much for listening. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Farm to Stable, a science-based equine nutrition podcast. Please share and subscribe if you found the content interesting. And if you have a topic you'd like to hear about, send it to equinenutritionphd@yahoo.com.